Right, so I'll start recording.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so welcome everybody to the Primary Care Commissioning Committee meeting. Apologies for the lateness of the start. As you all know, we overran in our last meeting. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, we have apologies from members Bill Cunliffe and Georgina Butler, and apologies in attendance from David Steele from NHS England.
Thank you. I confirm that we are quorate. And are there any declarations of interest that are not recorded in the register? Okay, if we go to the minutes of the previous meeting, everybody had an opportunity to read them and agree that they're an accurate record of the last meeting. Yeah, okay, thank you very much. If we go to the risk register, the actions log, there are two items on the actions log due for today. One is around the risk register, which Neil will cover off in the agenda item. Is that right, Neil?
I can touch on that one.
Yeah. And they're both for the risk register, actually. Should we cover those off under that agenda item?
Yeah, can do, Jason.
Okay, thank you very much. So, sorry, I'll just close the wrong screen. I'll just open it again, find my way back to the papers. Schoolboy error. So we'll go to item 6 in, which is the risk report. It's an item for decision. The committee are being asked to receive and note the attached risk and discuss whether they accurately reflect the risk profile. Neil.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, there hasn't been a huge change in the risk register. We've had 4 risks on there for a while now. I think Ros reviewed some of them, or most of them, back in February, March time. They're not due for review until, I think, due for review shortly in May, most of them. So they haven't changed drastically, but we bring the report quarterly anyway for consideration, and we try and get that in sync with the review timetables. But we've just a little bit out of kilter this time around. That said, I think it's still useful to bring it on a regular quarterly basis just to get it in front of the committee and see if there's anything that we do need to amend on these risk register. Given where we are in the life cycle of the CCG, some of these might take a different viewpoint on some of these, because I think the risks that are contained within there we discussed previously, I think are all still current, but welcome everybody else's views. There's one risk we have changed recently around, or the risk rating. It's still a high risk, but it's reduced its scoring around the sustainability of primary care. I think that bobs up and down, and depending on what lens you look through that one, you can come up with a different scoring for that, because it is quite a big risk. And in previous years, we've tried to disaggregate that and then lumped it back together. But I think that, you know, the issues around sustainability of primary care, I know we've talked about that earlier today and from different lenses. So I think that one's still a very accurate one to keep on there. The only one I was going to raise around primary care commissioning committee arrangements. You know, we've got I think the risk for the CCG is low, but I think we talked earlier in the day, Jeff, around the transition to the ICB and what that means for primary care commissioning arrangements. So we may want to look at that risk through a slightly different lens, and not just around have we got the setup of primary care commissioning committee arrangements correct, which I think probably have for the moment, but what's coming over the horizon, and do we need to flag anything within that risk as about continuity of primary care commissioning arrangements. So that was more any kind of comment of the current risks, but I know we're late in the day and this isn't the most exciting topic, so I'll just leave it there, but open for discussion.
I think you do yourself a disservice, Neil. Just to bring everyone up to the same level of information, had a number of conversations today in different forums around the future arrangements of primary care commissioning and what will happen on the transition day when we transition from one statutory organisation to another, given that there's currently no plan has been communicated as yet as to what may happen. And the general consensus of opinion is that we need to prepare a plan now at place level in case no plan is forthcoming within the time frame to ensure continuity of commissioning arrangements and support to the practices in both the disaggregated places that the CCG currently covers. Internally, someone in the team will be looking at that over the coming weeks. I'm not sure whose lap that will fall in, but someone will be looking at that. Particularly, the starting point is what does the statute say? What arrangements should be in place? Because I'm not aware. I haven't read the statute yet. So, what statutory arrangements must be in place at ICB level, and how is that going to translate to place? So there's a piece of work going to be undertaken to ensure that we do have some continuity or some arrangements in the absence of information. The information may well be forthcoming as early as next week. Who knows? But we've got to have something in place rather than wait any longer. So thank you very much. Anybody have any questions for Neil about our risk register? No. Okay. Are the committee happy to accept that, note the risks, and are we satisfied that we've done everything we can to identify risks and put in mitigating controls?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Jill, month 12 seems like a long time ago already, but let's go back and have a look at month 12.
Yes, that time when you're balancing old year and new year both at the same time. So this is our pre-audit. So I suppose to that extent it's still a draft position for the 12 months of 2021 to 22. We have the added complication as we've had for some months now of having a number of allocations for primary care and other things, but it has a bigger impact on primary care passed through Newcastle Gateshead CCG that are destined to support the whole of the ICS. So we get some funding in, and then we, working with colleagues at NHS England, then have to transfer funds on to the other CCGs across the ICS. So that is, I suppose, one of the reasons why some of the balances that we have look a little bit odd, particularly when you look at the annual budget for the year, which is on page 4. That's showing some of particularly the winter access funding coming in and then being transferred out to other CCGs. Also, just to mention, there's some bits of funding which include the winter access funding, but also the funding for the additional roles reimbursement. We get a sum of money as an estimate in our budget at the start of the year, but once we start to spend more than that, that has to be kind of claimed on an arrears basis. So that's also sometimes leaves us slightly out of line. So having said all of that, the overall message is that we're reporting a full year underspend of £64,000 on the primary care delegated budget. The detail behind that is on Appendix 1. The table is showing a variance for the full year of £408,000, but that is because, and that's an overspend, that's because at the point in time this was produced, we were still awaiting an allocation for the Winter Access Fund for 472,000, which then will bring us to our correctly reported position of 64,000. We've since had that notified since this report was produced, so that will form part of the annual accounts reporting. The other tables are just kind of showing our total funding for the year, and back up in section 3 showing the movements from previous months, some of which represent the receipt of funding and some of which represent some of the adjustments in pressures or the reporting of those developments that we approved some months ago.
Does anyone have any questions for Jill? Yeah, Dominic.
Just a comment that I shared at CMC as well. I think with an £88.5 million annual budget for primary care, to come in with only a £64,000 underspend is quite remarkable. So just to thank the team in for helping us keep an eye on this and to identify where we could invest resource in other projects that would deliver improved care and experience for patients. So I think we've done very well. I would always argue that we should have more investment in primary care full stop compared to the investment in secondary care. So I think we do very well with the resource that we have. I wish NHS England would give us more.
I would fully support your view and like to publicly thank Jill, Ros, the whole team behind the primary care group in ensuring that the money that's allocated to spend on primary care health for our public and patients has got into primary care and isn't sitting there as a surplus waiting to be handed back to the centre or used to fund a different kind of healthcare. So I'd like and publicly thank everybody for their hard work and effort in getting to that position, especially during a time when primary care has been under the cosh, shall we say, and probably the busiest period in forever in primary care settings. So thank you to everybody there. Jill.
Yeah, thanks very much. I appreciate that, and also, you know, as well as ourselves, as other colleagues in the place-based teams have contributed to a number of those reports as well. I just also wanted to add that in terms of looking forward to the budget for 2022-23, I am hoping that we'll be able to bring something in May. There are a few queries still outstanding on a couple of items of detail and assumptions as to what's included in our allocation. Although, as you know, I think we've already reflected it, we expect it to be significantly tighter this financial year. But hopefully, I think the ICB's financial plan is submitted towards the end of this month for approval. So depending on how quickly we get an outcome from that, that'll depend on whether I can bring something back to me to get a sign off for next year's budget.
Thank you. How do we communicate to our member practices that the committee has allocated all of its money to them? Is that ever done? I wouldn't want, you know, they should know that the committee has managed the commissioning of their services in such a way.
I'm not sure that we've necessarily actively done it before, but I guess things like the bulletin or just general meetings with primary care might be somewhere where we could put a line or two together if that was what would be helpful.
It's just that I know that you know, in the CCG's annual report, we will be reporting a collective surplus within the CCG that we are mandated to deliver. I wouldn't want anybody to misunderstand that, especially from primary care. Misunderstand that actually we have not allocated any funding that we should have to primary care. That's all. Just to make that clear to the practices, really. Dominic.
I think it's a complex message to land just because of the totality of the budget, the various lines within it, and the sense that practices have felt in terms of pressures with staffing and responding to the pandemic. I think our £64,000 end of year surplus could be quite easily misunderstood, and what we as commissioners see as actually a positive achievement, I think, could be very much misunderstood as resource that should have just been distributed to practices without understanding the complexity, the timing, all of that. So I don't know, I certainly support the idea of communicating the extent of our investment and the creativity and the industry that's gone around that. But that would have to be done in quite a sensitive and complex way if the message was not to be missed.
Okay. understood. And in real terms, what's that? It's £1,000 of practice, isn't it? If it was equitably distributed, that surplus, that's pretty good, I think. But yeah, okay. Well, don't feel compelled to do so, but I just thought it's something that we might want to do, and if anybody was prepared to take up the challenge, then please do. Anybody any other questions for Jill? Okay. Before we go on to the next item, I did start the meeting by saying we would consider the actions and the actions log with Neil, and then promptly didn't do it. So, Neil, can we revisit that? And thanks to Ros for the prompt. Home working on the risk register.
I think we've discussed this, not in Primary Care Committee. I think it came up in governing body as well, Chair.
Yeah.
We have been sending messages to staff, and we do put prompts in our kind of staff emails around IG implications about home working and appropriateness of where you work and things like that. So I think I don't think a standalone risk for home working IG risk issues is necessary on the risk register. We do have a catch-all IG risk, a strategic risk on the risk register that's on there regardless of whether it's scored green or negligible. And I think all the considerations around IG at home are similar to the IG at work. We've just been stressing that you need to consider all of the same issues, but there are new ones. I totally get that. Working in a different environment that is a multi-use environment and not taking papers home and things like that. So we've tried to cover that off in bulletins and reminders to staff. But I don't think a standalone risk for that is necessary within the risk register because it's covered elsewhere. The other one, sorry, I wasn't at the last meeting, so around the CQC inspection framework, but certainly happy to have a conversation with Dominic and Ros if they think it needs to be incorporated in one of our existing risks, or if we need to consider a new standalone risk or not, but we can certainly look at that.
Ros, what's the best way to take that forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think initially we raised the risk because obviously we'd had 3 practices that have been rated as requires improvement, and we were sort of concerned that was going to be an ongoing issue. I think we have had another practice inspected that's actually achieved a good. I think the worry was that during COVID, they weren't taking into consideration some of the sort of the impact that had had. So I don't know if it needs to be added. We can certainly consider it. I think one of the things is myself and Philip are meeting with Next tomorrow to actually review the risk register. It feels like it's come around very quick, and I'm just aware we'll be doing that, and we may not feed back to this committee again we may not come back if it's in 3 months' time. But happy to have the conversation with Neil and perhaps consider if we just add in a potential risk. But I don't think it's as much of a risk as we anticipated. Is that your agreement, Dominic, as well with that one?
Yeah, no, fully in agreement.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so if you can, be mindful of that when you're reviewing the risk registers tomorrow. And if everybody's in agreement, we'll close that action on the log. We'll close both those actions on the log. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other business? We're at the end of the agenda very quickly. No, if there's any other business, thank you for the meeting today and for your contribution. And the next meeting is the 24th of May. I guess we'll still be on Teams. Will we still be on Teams? Are we going to meet Dominic? I haven't reviewed the latest staff bulletin that reminds me to book an office. If we're going
hybrid arrangements going forward with a little bit of options for meeting face to face, but not fully back in the office.
Okay. Do we have a meeting in June? We do, don't we? So June will be our last meeting, won't it? Our last scheduled meeting. Okay. So maybe we should aim to meet in person in June. It should be possible by then, should it? Without preempting anything, Neil?
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. I think we're going into the office we're going into the office as a team tomorrow to look to